get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat.
This is so awesome.
We are an open culture that believes
It's actually
in
a big
importance of
piece
What is that process that a developer, or let's say
as the Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed?
Welcome to In the Clouds. I'm your host, Stu Miniman, and we have an excellent special episode here this week. We're going to be talking about KubeCon and Cloud Native Con 2022, which is being held in beautiful Detroit. Joining me as my co-host, first time on this program, Michael Foster. He is the StackRox community lead. He's on my team here at Red Hat, and he also is the co-host of the Secure Cloudcast. Michael Foster, thanks so much for joining me. How you doing today?
Doing very well, Stu. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, how did we blink? Summer was gone. Here in the Northeast in the U.S., like we've got like nasty thunderstorms coming in. It feels like the sun disappeared for the day. Luckily, I've got okay lighting, in my home office here. But super excited to be getting together with you and big community at the Detroit show, which actually is not too far from where you are in Toronto, Canada.
Yeah, first KubeCon, just super excited. And yeah, summer went by quick, and I'm looking forward to the end of October in Detroit. Yeah,
so it was funny when I was talking to the team at the CNCF, and they're like, "Yeah, Stu, we're expecting a big crowd. We still bring lots of first-time people in. So, you are a longtime listener, first-time attendee in the Kubernetes space. I've been watching the Kubernetes space since the early days. Ricardo's company I used to talk to at the OpenStack shows, which it's funny. We all it's like, oh, OpenStack and what happened and this and that. Really, all the people that started like the Kubernetes wave, we were all there. We were talking about Docker in the early days and Kubernetes as it took off. So I'm really happy to welcome the program somebody I've known for a few years, Ricardo Rocha. He is the co-chair for the KubeCons this year. So that actually they had a virtual event in China at the end of last year. Of course, the event in Valencia, Spain earlier this year, and now the North America show in Detroit. He's also a computational engineer at Cern. So Ricardo, thanks so much for joining us all the way from Switzerland. How you doing?
Thank you so much for the invitation. Doing great. It's a pleasure.
All right, Ricardo, could you just, for a quick background, give us a little bit about, your personal, what you've been doing in your career, how you got involved as a co-chair here for this great show.
Yeah, so I've been, most of my career has been here at Cern, apart from a small sabbatical time. I joined as a student for my master thesis to work on what we call the grid computing infrastructure for Cern a long time ago before we started the LHC. It was very much like the predecessor of the cloud in a kind of more chaotic way than what we see today. But I worked a lot in that area, in also storage systems as a developer, and then infrastructure and monitoring systems. And eventually I ended up doing OpenStack for a few years. And while being on the OpenStack team, also started doing Kubernetes, getting very involved, also making sure that Cern had a good presence in the community and in the foundation. We joined the foundation as an end user. And everything grew to eventually becoming a co-chair for this last KubeCons.
Yeah, I tell you, Ricardo, I studied engineering. I love physics back when I was high school and college, took a lot of courses on it. My old high school physics teacher always wished I had gone that direction. I'm like, well, I have talked to a bunch of people from NASA and Cern and everything. So I feel like I'm adjacent to some pretty awesome science in my career, and love to see, as you said, the OpenStack journey, how containers play in, the Large Hadron Collider, obviously something a lot of people in our community know a ton about. Awesome. So it's funny, even our friends, my old friends at the Cube are going to be there. Looks like John Furrier's coming on here in the chat just to say hi. So you've been on the program there with me, John on the team. I'm sure we'll be doing the big wall-to-wall coverage at that event. So talk to us a little bit about Detroit. So first of all, just get out of the way, It's been a little bit weird the last couple of years. So, we had a massive event in 2019. I was at both the Barcelona show and the San Diego show. And the size of the show was just, we were getting over 15,000 people in North America, and it kept growing. Then, we were chatting. Many of us had our trip planned to go to Amsterdam. KubeCon will be back in Amsterdam in 2023. I know many of us are super excited for that. There was a little bit of drama around like masking and vaccine status and everything like that in Valencia. For Detroit, it's masks are required when you're at the event. And I believe it's either, vaccine proof or a negative test to be able to show, but we're no longer doing the, checking everybody's temperature on the way in. Maybe, Ricardo, do you know, how do we end up in Detroit is one of the questions everybody asks. Chris Short, who started this program that I'm hosting, lives in Detroit and, has been sharing a bunch of things. I'm interested. I've never been to Detroit. I hear the Riverwalk's really nice. Hopefully the weather treats us well. So, give us a little bit of, do we know why we're at that place, and go around there?
I actually don't know necessarily, because I think the decision had been taken before I joined. But my guess is also that a lot of the community in Kubernetes actually comes from this area. I know some of the first people that I became friends with also in the community, which are Bob Killen and Jeffrey Sika as well, that is also in the CNCF now. They are very active. And also Jorge Castro used to be the Kubernetes community manager. He's also from the area. So they are extremely excited about hosting everyone there. It might have been a bit of a push from the locals as well to get this going. But I think it's a guarantee that we'll have some fun. It's also quite interesting to see an event like this being in a place where there's a lot of history about evolution of manufacturing and all this technology that came from that area, but that maybe it's a bit more traditional than the more IT systems we see elsewhere. So maybe it's I think it will be interesting to see some reports from the two sides. Yeah.
I think it's going to be very interesting for edge use cases, I find, because you have a lot of auto manufacturing there. I think that's a use case that's coming up in the future. So I'm looking forward to some user stories around that.
Yeah,
pretty pumped.
For sure, there will be some. There's a couple of talks about it. Also about lessons learned from the automotive industry that could be applied for the open source communities as well. So there will be really nice, interesting talks in this area. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, no, Mike, you teed it up well. Like, I'm actually sitting on a panel. I'm a speaker. It's kind of interesting. After years of being there as kind of media and analyst, I get to be a speaker on a panel talking about edge computing. Definitely know some of the big automotive companies are speaking at the show. Love to hear what they're talking about. And as you say, yeah, the community, I mean, is so dispersed from this organization. So yeah, I haven't heard too much griping about it. Another, Brian Gracely, was originally from Detroit, and he's like, yeah, I'm sure the community will all complain about like local transportation or something. Just, there's always something that we need to look at. I've enjoyed that this show is one that has moved around different cities, and it's not just, Vegas and San Francisco or things like that. So you get a little bit of a diversity of the audience. And as we noted, a lot of the people that come, it is their first time. So it's good to mix up the community. It's good to bring new people in. And there's a lot of community events, Ricardo, that I see. It's the CNCF has done a great job of always adding pieces. You want to share, so there's some new things going on, or things that you're particularly excited about when it comes to the event and the community itself?
Yeah, so I think for KubeCon, I think the most impressive part is the number of co-located events on the days prior to the conference. This have been like really growing with time, with every event, and I don't even know the total number right now, but there's I think there's something for everyone. There will be events covering eBPF. Lots about security. There is now a 2-day event even for the co-located, observability, AI, batch, and HPC. There's really a very diverse number of colos in addition to the topics we have in the normal tracks at KubeCon. I think that will also attract a lot of people to come, not only for the main event, but maybe come the days before, which also opens up the possibility for them to participate in more community-oriented, like the contributor summit or the smaller events we have just before, and get more involved. Sometimes KubeCon can be a bit overwhelming because of the number of people, so it's also nice to have this possibility to participate in these smaller events where the interactions are a bit easier, maybe.
Yeah, speaking of the 2-day security summit, I'm bright and early on Monday morning doing a keynote. So it's pretty awesome to have that and then get into, the 301, 401 sessions that are security heavy. So you get a good flavor. It doesn't necessarily have to bleed into KubeCon. You kind of get those focused individuals, right, in the co-located events. And then there's a couple new ones, right? I think there's SigStoreCon is a new one. eBPF for its second session or third session is pretty popular.
Yeah, and the batch HPC will be the second time. It's now a full day. It used to be a half day as well. There might be a couple of new ones as well. And there's some...
Just before we get off the security topic, there's a new thing, Security Slam. Can the two of you, what have you heard about this? How does that tie into things?
So I've been following Security Slam. I know that the SIG for security has done a lot of work in the last 2 years. Just around kind of setting some best practices for CNCF projects that are coming through. As you know, security is throughout the entire process, needs to be available. And so they've kind of created a framework for, if you want to donate your project, bring it in. We'll have some suggestions for you, things that will just harden your repositories, best practices for CIs. So it's pretty cool, especially for some of the smaller projects where you typically have maybe a couple maintainers or more. And I think the cutoff is already done. It was September 19th to submit your project. And then over the next month, you're going to have a couple meetings and they're going to get together with some of those representatives. I think it's awesome. It's great outreach, especially for, maybe some teams that don't necessarily have the security expertise to leverage some very knowledgeable people. That was my takeaway. I'm not sure if you've been following Security Slam, Ricardo.
Well, I think it goes beyond KubeCon. It's a bigger thing. Like you mentioned, it's something like the tech security has been super proactive in trying to help out projects, not only on their on this maturity evolution that we have in the CNCF with projects going to sandbox, incubation, graduation, and they really have been incredibly helpful having this. Security bodies for a lot of the projects that need some help, and are really doing these joint security reviews for some of the projects. And then now with this initiative for the Security Slam, I think this is incredible. So they've been really a good example of a very, very active group within the TOC.
Yeah, and starting it early, because I know that there's been some projects that have been wanting to be donated and been held up by security fixes a little later on in the process. So, I'm all for it. I think it's great.
Yeah, I think it's also like one of my co-chairs is Emily Fox, and she's like everywhere, and she's super active, amazing, and it's really like I think getting people like this in these groups really pushes the community forward as well.
Yeah, no, what I love is the comment I'd made a few years ago is for this community to be successful, it can't just be Kubernetes. And you were talking, heavy on security. There are people that come to the co-located events just for these kind of activities or live in some of the communities. And, while Kubernetes is the project that got us here, that ecosystem around it, some of the areas where often they tie into Kubernetes, but many of them, live orthogonally next to them. So from our standpoint, like I'll be at the OpenShift Commons is a big one that we do. I love that we've got a lot of customers just sharing their stories and what they're involved in. Many of them participate in the communities because, of course, that's one of the things we see in these ecosystems. There's many of the projects that started at not some software vendor, but some customer that solved a problem that they had and brought things in. So there's so many of these projects. Like going on this week is ArgoCon in San Francisco. So while some events, hey, let's co-locate it in KubeCon, it's getting a little bit full. So yeah, I mean, Knative Con's going to be there, I think, for the second time that they're doing it. But Argo, I guess they decided to hold it in San Francisco. We've got a member of our team been attending it. I've been watching some of the stream activity out on social for it. But yeah, it's this interesting collaboration, but loosely coordinated, pieces of the activity. It goes beyond the walls of the KubeCon show itself. So anything as Ricardo, how do we, as a co-chair, how do you look at that? I mean, did the co-located events, did you have much interaction with that, or are you mostly focused on the primary program itself and the tracks?
Yeah, so the main focus is clearly the main event, but there is some coordination in terms of talks that might have been submitted to both the KubeCon event and co-located. So in these cases, people are given preference, and as well as like for other reasons, because I'm in this area, I also help with the batch and HPC day, so I've been involved in that specific co-located event. But there is some sort of coordination to make sure that the content is not overlapping, or to sort of coordinate the different tracks in KubeCon with co-located events, and then we also evaluate a bit how things might evolve in the future, so that people get the best content. One thing, because you were mentioning about community and things like Security Slam, so there's one new thing for KubeCon North America, which is the Contribfest, and that's the first time that this will happen. And this is kind of an expanded maintainer track. So the maintainer tracker is still there. Projects will still have their slots, and maintainers will be able to present and reach out to end users. But one new event is this idea of Contribfest, where projects are able to have a longer slot. It's 1 hour and a half. And the idea is to onboard more contributors, because this is an issue that all the projects have that is not easy to solve. So trying to attract new people to ease the process of onboarding new contributors into the projects. So this is the first time we'll try this, and I'm very excited about this. There's already like 7 projects that will participate. So I think if this gets successful, we can see more of it in the next events.
That's awesome. I'd love to hear some of your insight. How do you balance some of the, oh, hey, there's new projects we want to educate people on, versus getting people involved in more of the project, versus, there's the 101 education. There's always the new people coming in. In the early days of this show, if you go back 4 or 5 years ago, like every show, it was like, oh wait, here's the hot new project. It was like, okay, now we're talking about, service mesh, when we were trying to first understand it, or some of these pieces. How do you balance that? Because, I'm sure you're familiar. There's like a meme in the industry almost, is if you look at the CNCF landscape, it's like, oh my God, there's hundreds of things there. Nobody can know even, a big chunk of what's going on there. There's just too much.
Okay, that's a very good question, and this has been one of the main focuses we had for Valencia and now for North America, which was to try to rebalance the tracks. What we saw is that some of the tracks in previous events had a lot of submissions, and then some other tracks were kind of less popular. And also some topics are kind of orthogonal to all the tracks, security being one. There's a dedicated track, but actually there's a lot of talks in other tracks as well that will cover security. So we've kind of reorganized the tracks a bit to try to balance the topics and make sure that it's all leveled. And then in another sense is also what you mentioned, that a lot of people are coming for the first time. So to make sure that there's a balance, I think the numbers in Valencia was 65% of the attendees were their first KubeCon, which might not mean that they're new in the community, but they are new to the event at least. So we try to balance that as well. And similarly, in terms of end user talks versus more project or vendor talks, so kind of balance all of this and make sure it fits the audience. There's the CNCF publishes after every event this transparency report that has all these numbers, and this is also something we take very much into account when working on the program.
Yeah, very cool. I kind of wanted to go back because scratch my curiosity itch. I had a little bit of a background trying to incorporate Kubernetes into a very specific research institution I don't want to name, and a lot of the issues was just getting a lot of the data scientists onboarded to understand how the batch computing works, to understand the distributed system, because a lot of people, it tends to get rented out, right? You get specific systems, you get access to them. Just kind of curious what's going on in the community, any new insights, any specific features that a lot of the community is looking for. Shed some light on it.
Absolutely. This has been one of the big focuses in the last year, I would say. So one thing we did for Valencia already, we introduced a new research and academia track that focuses on that and kind of tries to bridge the traditional conference world with supercomputing with the more enterprise IT conferences. But then specifically on functionality, so there's this new Kubernetes working group for batch, where the main focus is on filling the holes that are making it not completely easy to run batch-like workloads and HPC workloads on Kubernetes. And these are things like focusing on advanced scheduling, things like fair share, co-scheduling of workloads, queuing, of course, which is not there on the by default, and then as well as extending the job API to express things like MPI jobs or array jobs and things like this. And then
Very
more
cool.
specific, there's a couple of features that are being targeted.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm been following that kind of passionately since it was one of my first jobs in Kubernetes. So it's very cool to hear where that's going, because I think Kubernetes does allow some scheduling. It allows you to make better use of some high performance computing if it's set up properly. I'll say that, but it can sometimes be a headache, right? And as I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the main motivation. Also, there's clear gains on containerizing applications that researchers see in terms of reproducibility and more easily deploying workloads in different environments.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can bridge this to something like Kubernetes, where you can just use the native APIs instead of having additional systems on top, that will also be helpful.
Yeah, packaging up all those R packages from the 1970s and 80s is it's a little bit of a challenge, but once it's done, it's very useful, right?
If you work here at Cern, you're C++ and eventually a lot of Fortran libraries that might still be around that need to be packaged somehow. Yep.
Sorry, we went on a little bit of a nerd rant, Stu. I know.
No, boy, it's like I learned Fortran when I was in high school. It's you're bringing me back some of those.
You should apply here then.
I think my skills can be used elsewhere. So Ricardo, I'm curious. You got a really interesting view to be able to do the virtual event in China, then what we were doing in Europe, which a lot of people showed up, but still we're dealing with some of the hybridness. Are there any things geographically? Do you program differently for the different geos, or is it just kind of fall on the calendar as to when things fall out?
I'm actually not completely sure about the times. I think it has been spring, around springtime.
Yeah, but I'm saying when you think about, okay, do we make a security track even bigger when it's in Europe, or there's special interests that they care about GDPR in Europe, so therefore we need to think about this. In North America, they're doing a lot more public cloud, so we might need to think about this. Is there any geographical differences between the shows?
I think you will see in North America, you will see some trend to highlight usage of cloud native in kind of automotive industry. Like you could expect something like that to happen, so that will be the case. And then the other thing is we also try to the same way we talked about diversity in terms of end users versus other kind of talks and even different companies submitting. We also try to have enough content that is local or close to the events. So in Europe, we try to have a significant number of European submissions, so that we in the program this is also reflected, so that a lot of these companies will be more familiar to the attendees, which kind of also has some impact. To listen to reports from maybe the companies that you use every day and you interact every day, to know that they're using the same technologies you're dealing with every day as well. That's also a nice thing to have. So there is some care on kind of this sort of regional diversity as well.
Yeah, and the CNCF does a great job also. There's the free passes that people can get and apply for. Yeah, I mean, diversity obviously is a huge part. The open source community does a good job, and the CNCF has had a lot of efforts in those kind of activities.
And the meetups as well. I know CNCF has the separate meetups. If you're looking for virtual passes as part of the Canadian meetup crew, we typically have some codes as well. So if you're a part of meetups, that's also a great way to meet people and get started in the project. So you don't have to. You can go to a monthly event instead of KubeCon once every blue moon.
Yeah. Do you know, like, I remember one of the things that was a little bit weird when I went to the LA show was there were some sessions you'd walk into and the speaker was virtual. Do we expect, are most of the speakers going to be in person at the Detroit show, or is it still a bit of a mix?
No, the majority will be in person, and also there's no more these rooms where you will walk in and you have the virtual speaker. There's these shared areas where for virtual talks everyone can just go there and watch them individually. Yeah, but the majority will be in person.
And if you miss a session or anything like that, typically all the sessions are uploaded 3 or 4 weeks after the show as well, right?
I think even earlier than that. It's they do an amazing job. It's like a couple of days later, and you start seeing things showing up on YouTube.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always used to do like a little write up. Hey, here's my sessions, and then all of a sudden they're all on YouTube, and you can consume them all if you're in a binge mood. So it's very cool.
Yeah.
One of the perks of the virtual / hybrid model, I think, right, is all that.
Yeah, it's still quite I think the virtual events were nice, but you could see the difference already a bit in LA and definitely in Valencia, that there is a value to do these things in person. It's very different to see all the activity going on in the corridors, in the discussions and interactions.
The hallway track is alive and well. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. That is what I noticed, because virtually attending KubeCon in Valencia, that the Slack channel wasn't as busy as it was at the previous ones when COVID first kind of started kicking off. So it's this, it wasn't as populated. I did kind of miss some of the funny chats from the maintainers, as speakers are speaking, they're in the Slack channel. So that was one of the things I did miss. But the hybrid model seems to be working out pretty well. So I'm pretty excited to, when you're there, you tend to miss some shows, so I can catch them all later, right?
And you could see that there's still value. Like there were 7,000 something people in person in Valencia, but there were 10,000 additional ones watching virtually. So there's clearly interest there.
Yeah, very cool.
All right. As we get towards the bottom of the hour here, how about the tech? Kubernetes 1.25, I believe, just came out. There's the never-ending announcements and the like. Ricardo, anything particularly you want to talk about? Mike, I know there's a couple things from the security side that you want to touch on too when it comes to the latest release.
I think for Kubernetes 1.25, the main thing is the pod security policy removal after the deprecation a couple of versions ago. This is kind of the end of a process that started when a lot of the APIs moved to stable and had some changes, and this did have an impact, especially with the migration, with the move from 121 to 122, which is kind of a big one. But I think in that area, it's clearly there will be a consolidation. Also, the change in policy to not have beta APIs enabled by default for new APIs. This is something that people will appreciate, so that you know when you're in beta that this is beta, and that because it was kind of common. It's there, so people use it, and then when they change, it's always a bit more painful. I think that's kind of important. From main features from our side, I don't think we have any highlight from the last release that is getting our users pressing us to offer the new systems.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
seems like a lot of consolidation, I think, in this latest release. One of the other, I mean, touched on pod security policies, the removal of storage drivers in terms of maintenance, I think is one nicer for the community and upstream, I think, because obviously you have a lot of different storage drivers that are maintained by different groups. So it's, let them maintain it, and you can kind of let the community figure out which storage drivers are useful accordingly, right? I think that's great. I do like, even though the pod security policies are deprecated, the pod security admission controller, I forget the specific acronym. I think it's a lot better of an architecture where you have the option whether you want something that's default hardened or default open, whereas the pod security policies, if they weren't in place, your cluster just didn't work, right? It was sort of a fail shut. So I think that, and I watched over the last 2 years, the conversation around pod security policies and all that. I think they did a great job with the new option. The question is just going to be adoption now, right? Is now we have to educate users on the new way to use the admission controller. You're going to have a lot of downstream projects that use PSPs for enforcement now need to change.
Yeah.
So I think it is a big, there's a reason why it's highlighted in terms of the major changes on 1.25, and it's going to be interesting, the conversations next month.
Yeah, I think it's the other one that we also didn't mention was the drop of Docker support previously, not in 1.25, but that's also important. I think the reason 1.25 doesn't bring anything to highlight, at least for our Cern deployments, is that we did these moves in the previous releases. So for example, we've been using CSI and storage drivers for all our storage systems for quite a while. And also we had moved to out of Docker for runtime for a while as well. So it's kind of, it highlights that it's always better to kind of push these things as soon as they're announced than waiting for the last release. Which always puts a bit more pressure into when you need to upgrade.
It is definitely one of those challenging things out there. Hopefully, everybody's seen the communication, not waiting too long, taking advantage of that. We're a couple of years ago we reached that real maturity level of Kubernetes in this space, but there were some decisions that we all made as a community early on, and deprecating certain things. Usually it's like, oh wait, if I've got an API, I should be able to count on that for a long time. It's like, well, okay. A couple of years ago we reached the maturity, and some of the earlier things we need to kind of clean it out. So it's good. I think goodness overall. Yeah, any feel, it's funny when you talk about the industry as a landscape, the question is like, oh, hey, come on, this is all boring and mature stuff. And, I look at our roadmap and talk to our product managers and look at the communities, and I'm like, oh my God, we've got so much work to do. And there's so many other things that are coming on, and announcements and new projects always popping up. So while some of the basic blocking and tackling is taken care of, it's exciting. It would be like, it's like, oh, Cern, come on, you guys built the LHC, years ago. I'm sure there's nothing new with science that you're working on. And it's like, nope, we're going to keep lots of people working on that for the foreseeable future. So, any thoughts as just the community overall? Are we at peak, past peak Kubernetes, or what's your take, and what do you hear in the hallways of conversations?
Well, my feeling was, like, for the last 2 years that we were reaching the peak, but we didn't. We keep going. So it's hard to say that we are reaching the peak right now. I guess at some point this will stop growing. But when you see things like the push that has been going in the last year for supply chain security, with projects like Sigstore showing up and really being widely adopted everywhere, and integrated into other projects. And then you have eBPF showing up for everything, basically, for anything from networking, observability, security. It seems to touch everything. And then you have WASM for alternative runtimes. So I don't see it stopping right now.
Yeah. So I'll make a comment. I think the last CNCF report, I think there was a number that was a little bit misleading, as it said 96% of companies, if I remember right, were either using or planning to use Kubernetes. I can tell you, I meet with some very large Kubernetes shop. Nobody is like done. Like, you know, it's not like, oh, I've adopted everywhere. Most companies are still in the, you know, early to mid phases of their rollout, and plenty of companies are still getting started. So while, look, you know, there aren't many places that you go that if it's relevant to them that they aren't familiar with Kubernetes and maybe haven't tried it a little bit, we've still got, you know, it's awesome in the general parlance. We've crossed the chasm, but we've still got, you know, some of the early majority and all of the late majority to go. And industry-wise, we've been hitting everybody for years, but there's still, you know, there's still lots of room for growth and expansion and lots of innovation still going on in the ecosystem. So, yeah, Mike, anything you wanted to hop in on that discussion?
Not too much. I mean, just as a security talking head, I think it's pretty cool, the 6 StoreCon. I think that side of the industry is going to continue to evolve over the next 2, 3, 4 years. I think, you know, as maybe it's not consolidation, maybe we're getting kind of to that top end of the maturity and adoption, but still a long way to go. And there's tons of new projects popping up. I find things are getting more niche too.
Are you saying we haven't just solved all the security issues and we can all just go home and be safe and just leave our credit card and licenses out in public view?
Crazy, I know. It's it's very cool, and also just that SIG Store is working with a lot of the other projects, right? Like now it's just going to become a little bit more consolidated, integrated. I think watching all those projects evolve is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think something really cool with all this that has been happening is that when we started using containers, the security people were kind of reluctant because it was yet another thing that they have to look at in addition, like physical to virtualization, now containers. And actually, the whole ecosystem is building something that is working towards improving security significantly. And I think a lot of people, even the ones that were reluctant, start realizing this, that we can actually offer something better than we had before in a much easier way. I think it's really nice to see how things are going.
Yeah, no, definitely. Right. It's, you know, containers aren't just, you know, stateless, you know, applications that we don't think about. We talked about the CSI drivers and some of the things, the storage and networking in this space matured, you know, pretty fast. So Ricardo, can you give us any? There's a TBD on the schedule for the party. Unfortunately, I'm pretty sure Eminem is not going to be the Detroit act, or Kiss, you know, is another big Detroit rock and roll show. So, you know, CNCF doesn't, you know, do the huge blowouts. There've been some interesting parties. I remember one of the vendors had like KubeCon. I'm sorry, Ice Cube at KubeCon, as he called it, which was a hilarious show to see. So we usually get some good flavor. Like there was a party in Barcelona once that had like, you know, the food trucks and things like that. So can you give us any sneak peek as to what we should expect for the show party or any other fun activities?
For the party, I actually don't know. I would expect that something very related to the local theme of automotive will be there. I can't confirm anything, but I would expect that.
We all get self-driving cars, right? Is that you know? Ricardo said it here first. You get a car. You get a car. You know.
Can't confirm anything, but I guess you can expect something in that topic of automotive.
Yeah,
very cool. We got paella in Valencia, like this massive paella being cooked for everyone, and everyone would go and take some from the same place. So I think, yeah, there's theme there to follow as well.
Awesome. All right, Ricardo, any you know, closing thoughts as to, you know, anything you personally are excited about, you know, sessions you're given, your team, or, you know, friends in the community that you think people should check out?
Yeah, so I think the one thing I always push here is for expanding the use case that we are mostly interested on at Cern, which is this idea of making research and scientific computing easier with Kubernetes and cloud native. So this is something that that I'm really happy that we have these events following on that, and then the Contribfest. So I would highlight that everyone wanting to become a contributor and participate and meet the awesome people in this community, Contribfest will be a really nice place to start. So make sure you reserve some time to choose one or two, and we'll be very, very glad to welcome everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I threw in the chat your well, basically keynote that you're doing with Emily and Frederick there, right, on Wednesday. So you're doing opening and closing remarks, I think, as well as a couple other sessions.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're everywhere on this schedule. So
yeah, we do the introduction. It will be very similar to previous events. So we'll do the introductions, and then there will be the project updates and for CNCF and Kubernetes, and then yeah, we also get a slot to focus on one topic each of us. So I think it will be a lot of fun. There's a lot of other interesting keynotes and a lot of sessions to attend as well.
Yeah. Well, Ricardo, hey, first of all, thank you so much. You know, being a co-chair of the event, we know that there's a lot that goes into that. It's great to see, you know, community is one of the big things here. And I know a lot of us are really supportive of that. Mike, from your standpoint, any key sessions? You know, you mentioned, you know, you're going to be busy, lots of security content to keep you happy. But any other final things you're looking at?
I'm actually just building my schedule out right now. My thing, I'm going to be at Cloud Native Security Con and Sigstore Con the first 2 days. So if you're there, come find me. Otherwise, probably after that, I'll be tracking down all the speakers I want to watch at KubeCon. I'm pretty excited, and I just wish you a safe flight on your way, and I hope to see you in Detroit.
Awesome. So yeah, look, final note, the schedule's online there. The Red Hat team, you know, we've got a strong presence there. We've got a lot of people speaking. We're participating in a lot of the Day Zero events. So as Mike said, check out the security one. OpenShift Commons is free to attend. It's one of those Day Zero events on Tuesday. It's a short walk from the convention center. So hope you'll see there. I'll be probably checking people in at that event as it happens. And, you know, I love just meet new people as well as, you know, seeing lots of people from the community. So I'll be by the Red Hat booth and walking the hallway track and checking out all the various pieces. So again, hey, Ricardo, thank you so much for all the effort in the community, and thanks for joining us today. As Mike said, you know, wish you safe travels, everybody. Be sure to check the security lines. They're often taking a little bit longer than possible, and hope to be able to get some Detroit pizza with you in just about a month. So Ricardo, thank you again. And yeah, everybody, we'll be back. Actually have another preview show. Normally we're bi-weekly. Next week, we're doing a special one for Ansible Fest. I've got Tom Anderson, who's the general manager of Ansible, coming on. Their show is actually the week before KubeCon in Chicago. So lots of Red Hatters will be in the Midwest of the US for a couple of weeks for those two shows. So join us back here next week. Let us know if there's other people you'd like us to have on this program. Feel free to reach out. Any comments. Hopefully we will see you either in person or virtually at the KubeCon show. I'm Stu Miniman, and thank you as always for joining us on your journey in the clouds.